National Institute of Justice.
Residential punishment, 19 years in Texas Department of Corrections.
Hello, I'm James Wilson. The scene you are about to see is similar to ones you have watched dozens of times on television programs about cops and robbers. But this is not fiction. This is real. A man dies.
Shouldn't be awful fucking church.
I know they got to be bullshit. They ain't killing nothing. They ain't gonna kill nothing.
What you have just seen actually took place on the streets of San Diego. Gun in hand, a man faced police officers when they arrived at the scene. He moved, they shot. Were they right to shoot? When should police use deadly force? In general, they use it when innocent lives are in danger or sometimes to stop a suspect fleeing from a crime. About 100 police officers are killed in the line of duty each year. Officially, about 300 civilians are killed each year by the police, but some say the real figure may be twice as high. Most of those killed are members of minority groups, leading to charges that racism may affect police decisions when to shoot. These numbers and the conflicting charges are but a small part of the story. For almost any police officer, the decision to shoot is extraordinarily difficult. It must be made in a split second, face to face with another human being whose intentions are ambiguous and often in a noisy, distracting, even chaotic situation.
This is the police.
Okay, don't shoot me.
All right, right there.
I
Put your
cannot-
hands up. Put your hands up and come out.
I cannot move, I'm
Put your
crippled.
hands up.
I cannot move.
Put your hands out front.
This is not a real situation, but it could be. It's training for the New York City Police Department based on actual occurrences. Every officer is required to participate in the role-playing and make the decision about whether to shoot or not shoot.
I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any previous experience, or we haven't done anything like this.
Everything's going through your head all the time, and you don't know, am I doing the right thing, am I not doing the right thing? You hope you do okay?
The object of the game is to get this individual out, under control, with no damage done to him or yourself or your partner or anybody else that may be innocently standing around.
Who is that?
Police.
I don't want pizza. Next door for pizza. Close my door, go away.
This is the police.
Oh, police, what you want?
Who's in there with you?
Nobody. Just me.
Why are you hiding behind the door?
Hey,
Come
you-
out from behind the door, now.
I'm coming. Don't shoot me.
Put your hands up.
Don't shoot.
Look like you shot an unarmed man, correct? Okay. Just, want to clear it up because you didn't see any weapons on him. I know you couldn't have. Okay? Try it again. We'll erase that bullet.
I was scared and I just pulled the trigger. And they tell you when to shoot and when not to shoot, and I shot wrong. At least I learned it here, not out there.
They have to shoot, don't shoot. That's what has to come up. And they realize if they shoot too fast, you just shot an innocent person. If they hesitate, maybe they die.
There's a good chance a police officer will never have to make the decision about whether to use his gun. The purpose of the training, to help prepare an officer for that one time when it really counts.
I had my gun out, and he turned back towards me, and he had a black pistol in his hand. As he started turning back towards me, I fired a shot, and I hit him in the back. He dropped immediately to the floor.
It's been years since Detective Sean Grennan fired those shots, but he still remembers it vividly.
I could close my eyes and I could see the whole thing right in front of me again. I could see how it happened, what happened, exactly what happened. It's something that's difficult to forget because I am a human being. I'm not God, and I don't really have a right to take anybody's life. And looking at it from that point of view, I have to feel it's something that maybe 30 years from now I can still close my eyes and I can see the whole thing once again, exactly how it went down, exactly how he went to point the gun at me, and exactly what I did. And at that point, I know I made the right decision. I don't think there was any other choice. I hope not, anyway.
New York City police are only permitted to use deadly force to protect themselves and innocent bystanders, or when failure to stop a fleeing felon would endanger the community. But over 20 states allow the police to shoot felons fleeing from the scene of a crime, even if it's a property crime, even if the suspect is unarmed. That was the law in Tennessee when Edward Garner, a 15-year-old black youth, broke into a neighbor's home in Memphis.
We made it to the scene, and one of the neighbors was pointing and said he's breaking in next door. Anyway, by the time we got there, it was a fence separating me from going on around. The young man ran out the back door and streaked across the yard, and I hollered, "Please halt."
The 15-year-old halted, and the officer was able to see both his hands and could tell that he wasn't armed. But the officer didn't move to apprehend him, and seeing that, the 15-year-old tried to flee, tried to jump the 6-foot fence, and the officer fired and struck him in the head and killed him.
It's a split-second decision that has to be made, and I was quite comfortable with it. I was familiar with our policy as far as shoot and don't shoot, and I just exercised that after every other means had been exhausted.
Officer Elton Hyman maintains he was not absolutely certain the youth was unarmed or whether anyone inside the house was hurt. As it turned out, Edward Garner was unarmed. His crime, taking $10 from an empty house. But Officer Hyman had acted within the fleeing felon law of the state of Tennessee.
Remember that the individual involved put himself in this position. He's the one that decided to perpetrate a crime. So first of all, he puts himself in a precarious position. Then, once he is confronted, he's given an opportunity to stop. All he has to do at this point, when notified by that officer to stop, all he has to do is stop and obey the command of the officer, and that's the end of it.
In my opinion, it's difficult to say. I realize they have a rule down there to shoot a fleeing felon. But you're talking about a small kid, about 85, 90 pounds, and he's on a fence. What difference does it make if he gets away? What difference does it make? There's always another time, another place to catch him.
114 people were shot by police in Memphis, Tennessee between 1969 and 1975. Police community tensions ran high, especially over the issue of whether these shootings had anything to do with the race of the suspect.
When Memphis police shot at violent, dangerous suspects, they shot at them in a racially proportionate and even-handed manner. But when they shot at the non-violent property crime suspects like Garner, they shot at mostly blacks.
Since the Garner shooting, the Memphis Police Department has adopted a more restrictive policy for the use of deadly force. The question is, can any policy help a police officer make that agonizing, split-second, life-or-death decision, shoot or don't shoot?
If a police officer gets involved in a shooting in the street today, he will be second-guessed for the next 6 months by the most learned minds in the country as to whether he was right or wrong. And it's not fair because that individual is dealing right then and there with a split-second decision. Right or wrong, he's going to be responsible for that decision.
Joining me in the studio are James Fife, professor of criminal justice at American University and formerly a lieutenant in the New York Police Department, Officer Dick Hickman of the Dallas Police Department and president of the Dallas Police Association, and Cornelius Behan, chief of police in Baltimore County, Maryland. Mr. Fife, when you first joined the New York Police Department, what were the rules governing shooting?
They were very much as they are in Tennessee today. A police officer could use deadly force to protect himself or to apprehend any fleeing felon.
Did you ever shoot a person?
No, I have not.
How did the rules change?
Well, the law in New York State changed and became more restrictive in 1967. It permitted the police to shoot only at fleeing violent criminals. And in 1972, the police department made its own internal policy, which was much more restrictive than the law. So in essence, in New York City, a police officer is permitted to shoot in defense of life.
And that's all?
And there are some very rare exceptions. For example, if he saw a son of Sam who had emptied his gun into a car and run down the street, the police officer would probably be expected to shoot on the grounds that that individual would present a real danger to the community if he wasn't apprehended immediately.
When the policies became more restrictive, what happened to the number of shootings by police at civilians?
They decreased dramatically. In 1971, for example, the police in New York City killed 87 people, and the policy went into effect in 1972. And the number of shootings, especially the shootings of fleeing people, went down dramatically. And now, in New York City, I don't think they've shot and killed more than 40 people in a year. And the number is usually around 26 or 28 or 30 per year.
Has this increased the danger to police officers? Are more police officers being injured or shot at by civilians?
Intuitively, you might think that, but that hasn't been the case at all. The number of injuries and serious injuries and the number of killings of police officers in New York has declined dramatically. And that's been the experience in most places that have restricted the use of deadly force by officers. So,
is the experience in New York similar to what you know of from your own studies of the experience in other cities? As the rules are made more restrictive, there are fewer civilians shot, but no more police officers shot.
That's correct. That's correct.
Now, many people have made the criticism, we heard it just a moment ago, that the police in some places are more likely to shoot at blacks than at whites under similar circumstances. Now, you've studied this personally in New York City. What are your conclusions?
Well, your conclusion is accurate. Blacks are more likely to be shot than whites, but that has to do with the different rates at which blacks and whites expose themselves to those kind of circumstances. So just as there are more blacks in jail, just as there are more blacks arrested, more blacks run into police officers in situations in which they're a threat to officers. So that in New York, I found in New York and most of the other cities I've looked at, I found no evidence at all that police were, quote, discriminating with their trigger fingers. In places where discretion is broad, and as Mr. Winter pointed out in our introduction, in Memphis, for example, I did work looking at shootings there in the early 70s. And he's accurate. The police had very, very broad discretion, and it seemed to me that they were exercising it arbitrarily against blacks. They were shooting blacks in situations that were not threatening and shooting whites in situations where they really had no choice, where their lives were in danger.
Let me ask you this. There are both white and black police officers on duty in cities such as New York. Do black and white police officers shoot at different rates?
They do, except that a black police officer in New York, or probably most large cities, is more likely to be assigned to a ghetto area where crime rates are high than a white officer. So the question is whether a black police officer and a white police officer doing the same kind of work shoot more often,
but
more or less often.
In the aggregate, do black officers shoot more frequently than white officers?
Yeah, the black officer is more likely to shoot, he's more likely to be hurt, and he's more likely to be injured. And generally that has to do with the kind of assignment he has.
Officer Hickman, in Dallas, under what circumstances do you believe a police officer should be allowed to shoot at a civilian?
Only in situations where the officer or a third person's life is in jeopardy. And in certain cases, our state law in Texas permits the use of deadly force in property crimes. Even though our practicing policy in the Dallas Police Department has been prohibited the exercise of deadly force in property crimes, I'm still in favor of the policy being in conjunction with state law.
Well, give me a circumstance that would illustrate how the state law would operate with respect to property crime. What would happen that might lead a police officer to shoot when a property crime was being committed?
Well, we just had an instance in recent months in Dallas where an officer drove up on the scene of a strong-arm robbery. He heard the victim screaming, "They're killing me, they're killing me." He did observe at least 3 strikes to the victim's head with the assailant's feet. And of course, when the assailant saw the police officer, they split and ran. The officer chased one suspect, and in his mind, he felt he had a reasonable belief that if the felon escaped, that he'd be a danger to the community, so he shot the suspect in the back of the head and killed him. Under state law, he was justified in what he did, but under departmental policy, he was terminated from employment.
Why is the departmental policy more restrictive than the state law?
Well, that's a question that most of us don't understand either. We feel that that it should be consistent with state law to eliminate as much confusion in